Dobar dan. Pratite još jedno izdanje emisije Znam da znaš. Moje ime je Bojana Dabović, a moj današnji sagovornik gospodin Alex Sobel, poslanik Laborističke partije u britanskom parlamentu. Mr. Sobel, good afternoon and thank you very much for taking your time for this interview and for Gradska television.
Thanks for inviting me on.
Well, we should probably start with my questions since probably you have a busy agenda. So I will mention at the beginning that you are the chair of all-party parliamentary group for cooperation with Montenegro. How do you assess the current situation, the current political situation in our country and the path that Montenegro is taking?
Obviously, Montenegro is in the second round of presidential election. We've seen significant political upheaval in Montenegro over the last few months in the parliament and tensions between the governing party and the opposition. And there are issues in the wider Balkans, which I'm sure we'll come on to, which have impacted on Montenegro. Montenegro had been on a path to EU accession. Montenegro is a NATO member country. It is in the family, I consider it to be in the family of European nations. We obviously had the huge destabilizing political effect last year of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which has actually, in my view, reshaped the politics of the Balkans as well. So I hope that the presidential election will have a stabilizing effect on Montenegro and return it onto where it was really prior to the COVID pandemic in terms of its political path.
Mm-hmm. I assume that you are in a regular communication with the diplomatic representative of your country in Montenegro, Ambassador Karen Maddox. Could the international community have done more so that Montenegro would not become a problem in the region today? Because you probably know that Montenegro was an example for entire region before 2020.
I just want to, first of all say that I've been to Montenegro. It's a beautiful country with a lot of potential. I think looking at it from a UK and Northern European context, particularly for tourism, we need to work closely with Montenegro in terms of its economic development, and that those are discussions I've had with Montenegrin leaders and our own leaders here and our own ministers and the diplomatic community. And I think that what's happening now, the destabilizing event, is having an effect on that development. And so we all need to work, whether that's in Europe, in US, Canada, etc., to work with Montenegro to ensure that it is on a development path and that the political situation doesn't destabilize that.
Yeah, but could the international community could they do more in previous time and now today?
I think that maybe the world's eyes have been taken off the Western Balkans a little bit in the last few years. I think there was an assumption by many people, because so many of the Western Balkan countries, including Montenegro, joined NATO, and that people had been on the path to EU accession. Most of the Western Balkan countries are on the path to EU accession. That things had stabilised, normalised, and there was only one way, and there was no possibility of reversal. But I think that what happened on the February 24th, 2022, changed minds, but maybe more should have been done, more eyes should have been on the Western Balkans before that. When I was in Kosovo last year, we had a briefing from the NATO force there, from KFOR, Kosovo Force, about the station at Niš, and that station wasn't in fact a humanitarian station. It was a station for misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, and had 3,000 Russian personnel in it. Now, these are the sort of activities that we need to have eyes on. The other thing that's disappointed me from a UK point of view, and again something that I think our own government could have intervened and played a more positive role, is that our officers in Montenegro, in Kosovo and North Macedonia were all closed to the British Council. British Council is a hugely important institution in terms of people learning English, in terms of supporting the education system, cultural links. And now, unfortunately, our bases are in Belgrade and Tirana. I don't think that's acceptable, actually. And I think that we should now, looking at the situation as it is, reopen at least one of those offices in one of those countries, preferably all three. And I think it's really important that the UK and Montenegro retain those strong ties, and that the British Council has a strong base there, rather than having to operate out of neighbouring countries who may or may not have good relations with Montenegro.
And what are the chances that those offices will be opened soon in these countries?
We'll continue to campaign. We campaign against their closure, and we're campaigning for them to reopen. And I've spoken to the British Council, I've spoken to the Foreign Office. I'm hoping that what happened really, actually, what happened on the 24th of January last year should have been a wake-up call, and February 24th last year should have been a wake-up call, and they shouldn't have been shut, but the closures went ahead. So, I'm an opposition politician, so I've a limited influence over the government, but I'm doing my best to try and get those offices reopened.
Mm-hmm. As you also mentioned, the second round of presidential elections awaits us on Sunday, and in less than 3 months, the parliamentary elections as well. Do you think that there can be a different balance of power within the parliament of Montenegro, and that Montenegro, through this parliamentary election, can get a stable but truly pro-European government?
I think that's entirely in the hands of Montenegrins. What I'm really concerned about now is to ensure that both elections, but particularly the presidential election coming up, are free and fair elections, that Montenegrins who live abroad, because they can't cast an absentee ballot, are not in any way prevented from entering Montenegro through changing schedules of flights or ground transportation or other means, and so they aren't prevented from casting their ballot. The other communities are fully involved and engaged in the election, and that we don't see anything that could mean that cast doubt in it. I know that there are observers from the EU and the OSCE there. It's really important that there is absolutely nothing preventing Montenegrins from voting, and I think that it's not for us to dictate to Montenegro who their president or their government should be, but it is something legitimate for us to say that the elections should be absolutely free and fair.
Mm-hmm. But is the British government actually aware of the fact that these presidential elections are not only important for Montenegro, but for the whole region?
I think there is a growing sense that we have destabilization in the region. We have in Bosnia Republika Srpska, we have significant issues in Kosovo. In North Macedonia, it's slightly different, but there are issues there, particularly with their EU accession. We've got significant issues in Montenegro now as well, which we probably 2 or 3 years ago wouldn't have really thought. We'd have thought Montenegro as a stable country. And so I think there is a growing realization that there are issues, and that there's maybe some commonalities between the issues that countries have, and that there may be malign influence, malign actors behind this destabilization for political reasons. And we saw the same thing happening in Ukraine in the run up to 2014, obviously since then. So we can't be complacent. We need to ensure that we're exerting maximum pressure. UK, like Montenegro, as a member of NATO. Some of the other countries in the Western Balkans want to join NATO, but not members of NATO, although they have NATO troops there. We need to ensure that we are putting diplomatic pressure, that we are ensuring that we are offering a full support of defence to those countries, and that we are using every means is available to us to ensure that we don't see negative effects. We all remember what happened in the Balkans in the 1990s, and nobody wants to see that happen again.
Mm-hmm. But to what extent can you, as well as all our friends in the world understand the complexity of the situation in Montenegro. When I ask this, I am primarily referring to the fact that we in Montenegro, we have parties that declaratively they agree with EU values and Western values, but in practice, they support some other ideas. Can you tell the difference between those who are truly pro-European and those who are not?
I think that we can have a good estimation of that. That isn't something that's solely the preserve of Montenegro. Serbia itself, says it's on a track to EU membership, but also closely aligns itself with Russia. And as I said, just in one station, there are 3,000 Russian personnel serving. I think we're in a global situation where you cannot be aligned both to Russia and the EU. You have to pick, or NATO, you have to pick which side you're going to align yourself with and which path you're going to go down. This is not a situation where you can be unaligned. We are in a situation where Russia has invaded a sovereign state, where they're undertaking propaganda and other destabilizing activities, and the Serbs seem to have picked a side. And I think it's important that we know in other countries, neighboring countries, who is aligning with NATO and who is not aligning with NATO.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have in Montenegro a lot of political parties which support Serbia, and through Serbia they support Russia as well, and they do that openly. But you are also a co-chair of all-party parliamentary group for cooperation with Ukraine. Does Montenegro today look like Ukraine from 10 years ago? Can a parallel be drawn?
I think that we've got situations in Montenegro and actually elsewhere in the Western Balkans where you can see a path which might result in something similar to Ukraine. Although Russia wouldn't be the direct actor here, it would be Serbia. There are the same things: the propagandizing, the misinformation, the portrayal of particularly pro-NATO, pro-EU politicians but on social media through misinformation, as malign acts in their own countries, which is what happened in Ukraine. And so we need to be very aware of this, and we can't allow a situation where the same path happens. So we need to be very wise to it and strong to it. And we need to, through diplomacy, through economic ties, and through the work of NATO and through our NATO membership and NATO forces, ensure that we don't see anything happen again like Ukraine, because obviously we're having currently a catastrophic loss of life in Ukraine. We can't let that happen elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. But in both cases, Russia to Ukraine and Serbia to Montenegro, a Christian church, Orthodox church actually, played a key role. Russian to Ukrainian Orthodox church and Serbian to Montenegrin Orthodox church. How do you view the meddling of religious organization in the political situation of the countries, and where does it lead the country?
It's difficult for me from the United Kingdom to lecture other countries on separation of church and state. You probably need a French politician, which have a much clearer dividing line, or American politician on that, as our established Church of England has places in our legislature in the House of Lords. So I'd rather not lecture others on that. But I think that it's important that that faith organisations, particularly established churches, don't very clearly become partisan, so support one political party or a coalition of political parties against another set of political parties. That doesn't happen here in the UK. Although they are in the legislature, they sit independently, and that although the church can express its view on issues, which I'm sure it does, particularly on moral and ethical issues, that it isn't effectively a propaganda arm of the government or of a foreign government.
Given that you follow the situation in the Western Balkan region, besides mentioning that you are a chair of all-party parliamentary group for Montenegro and co-chair for Ukraine, you are also involved in all-party parliamentary groups for Kosovo, North Macedonia, and Albania. So you are familiar and you are involved in this region. You must be certainly familiar with the idea of the regional initiative Open Balkan, which the president of Serbia, Aleksandar Vučić, together with the prime minister of Albania, Mr. Edi Rama, they particularly insist on it. So what is your position on that initiative as opposed to the membership of into the EU?
So Edi Rama was in London last week. I'm sure people in the region are aware of this. I had lunch with other members of parliament with Edi Rama, and we discussed the matter of Albania's EU accession. And he was very clear that Albania's aim was to join the EU and accede to the EU, and that other initiatives or programs that Albania were involved in would not prevent that membership. Now, the UK are not probably best placed to comment on EU membership, as we're the only country ever to have left the EU, but it's clear to me that there are certain stipulations and there are very clear rules about membership of the EU, that accession to the EU. And so what if that is the stated aim of countries that are already in the open Balkans, like Albania, and other countries that may or may not join the open Balkans because they may have a change of government, and I understand that is potential in Montenegro if there is a change of president, if there is a change, depending on how the parliamentary elections go, that could create an issue. But I think it's probably more for somebody from the EU to comment on than me. But I wouldn't want the open Balkans to be utilised as an excuse or as a barrier to joining the EU or for any other international institution which would bring in countries in the Balkans into the sort of family of nations.
Mm-hmm. You already, actually, we both already mentioned the part of the role that Russia and Serbia have in this region, but actually what Vladimir Putin is for Russia region, that is Aleksandar Vučić for Balkan region. How dangerous is it for the countries of the region that Russia is destabilizing the Balkans through Serbia? What do you think?
I think it's any Russian involvement with any country aligning itself with Russia now in the current period are playing a huge risk. They have the potential of becoming a global pariah. At the moment, we're not really pursuing very strongly sanctions for countries that are effectively acting as third-party hosts for sanction-busting Russian products. We know there are third-party countries that are being used for Russian gas, Russian steel, wheat, even stolen Ukrainian wheat, which the Russians are trading. We've heard of instances of that. And I think that as time goes on, there'll be more and more severe action against third countries that act in that way. So, as I said, it's really important now that countries understand they have to pick a side here. That you cannot support Russia and NATO countries. You have to be very clearly on the side of Ukraine and aligned with NATO, particularly if you're a member of NATO or if you have ambitions to join NATO, which I know that's the case in the Western Balkans. Those two things are both true, it's not you to try and navigate now a way where you can somehow align yourself both with Russia and with NATO is effectively impossible, and people will be found out, and they'll be much worse for it in the end.
You mentioned, but I want to simply repeat it. There are several examples of destabilization of this region. You mentioned Bosnia and Herzegovina through the Republic of Srpska entity, the attempt of coup in North Macedonia and Montenegro in 2016, the destabilization of Kosovo. We see that every single day. Does the Europe see this danger, and Why are they so tolerant toward Vucic? Because we see that too.
I'm probably most involved with the Brussels dialogue between Vucic and Kurti over trying to resolve the issues between Kosovo and Serbia. And I think that the EU senses that it's being slowed down purposefully by Vucic, because Kurti offers and comes forward, and the Serbs say the right things but never progress the right things. So I think the EU and the UK, alongside that, and I've heard the minister say it, hopes that dialogue, that process, will be successful. But it's increasingly becoming clear that Serbia is not acting in good faith in that dialogue, that the likelihood of success is diminishing. And so we need to ensure that governments around NATO countries are very aware that the Serbs aren't acting in good faith. And I think there is that awareness, but there isn't yet a very clear plan of how to deal with it. And I hope that that's something that is being, that the ministers in the governments, in the foreign affairs departments of those different governments are thinking about it, are having meetings about it, and that it isn't getting lost, because rightly we should be supporting Ukraine, every one of us. And I know that in the Western Balkans have been supporting Ukraine as well. But effectively, we need to make sure that we're not repeating any mistakes, and that we aren't taking our eye off countries in the Western Balkans because we have a live war issue in Ukraine.
So, Mr. Sobel, we spoke about Kosovo, and we also mentioned that you are co-chair of all party parliamentary group for cooperation with Kosovo. But can you tell me, do you have a feeling that Serbia and Kosovo are just one step away from normalizing their relations?
I don't think so. The Brussels dialogue is ongoing, but it's making very slow progress. I feel that Albin Kurti is doing his best to reach a compromise and putting forward solutions, and I think the EU are acting in good faith. But I don't see that Vucic and the Serbs are acting the same good faith and are putting up barriers and blockages to the progress of the Brussels dialogue.
So you believe that Vucic has to make more progress on his side, so that those relations could be normalized?
Absolutely, and act in good faith and undertake the process and the actions that are agreed through Brussels. It's not enough to go to Brussels and then come and say that progress has been made, when in fact they're not actioning any of the things agreed or a lot of the things agreed in Brussels.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I also assume that you are familiar with the idea of the Serbian world, or in our language, Srpski svet, which is advocated most loudly by the Serbian historian Aleksandar Rakovic, and which implies the creation of a single Serbian country from Serbia, Republika Srpska, and Montenegro. I must mention that it was Rakovic who supported the candidate for president of Montenegro, Jakov Milatovic, in the upcoming second round of elections. But how do you see this idea of a single Serbian country that they promote?
I mean, the borders and the integrity of the states of Bosnia and Montenegro have been settled for a while now. They've both entered a number of international institutions. Montenegro has entered NATO and are looking at entering further international institutions. That these states, in the mind of the rest of the world, are settled, and we don't need to reopen what will result in huge amount of tensions, particularly between different communities in both Bosnia and Montenegro, by having some sort of imperialistic, expansionist Serbian worldview. It's nationalistic as well, and it's the opposite of where we need to be going in the world today. The world today should be about self-determination and respect for the integrity of state boundaries, where the people have clearly expressed their view, and that is exactly what's happened in Bosnia and Montenegro, and the Bosnians paid for it with quite a lot of blood, and so we certainly don't need to see this reopened, and because I'm concerned that it would lead to violence, and where communities are settled, then we need to ensure that peace and that settlement remains.
I would like to ask you if you could explain to us why Montenegro finds it very difficult to obtain any oxygen in the media or in the political arena, because Kosovo, in compared to Montenegro, is very often in the news. I mean, we see that ourselves here. We watch CNN, we watch Sky News, we watch BBC News, but Montenegro seems to have split under everybody's radar. Why do you think is like that?
I think Kosovo gets a lot of visibility because of the recent history of Kosovo and what happened in 1999 and 2000, the involvement of NATO in Kosovo and some of the tragic events that happened there, and the disappearance of children, murders, extrajudicial killings, all of those things. While Montenegro's path to statehood wasn't the same and didn't involve the UK and the US in the same way at all. So I think that's part of it. I think that there is some visibility in Montenegro, but not the issues in Montenegro, but more positively, actually. I think that there is quite a lot of visibility in Montenegro as a beautiful country, as a tourist destination, particularly Kotor and the coastal areas. So it does, but I think the geopolitical issues and which are obviously newsworthy in Montenegro aren't, and I think that we probably do. So we had a debate on Kosovo, which I led just a couple of weeks ago, and I am putting in a debate on Montenegro, a similar debate on the security concerns in Montenegro. So hopefully that debate will be accepted by the Parliament of the UK, and we can have a debate on Montenegro, and that will help raise visibility in the UK, not in the US. It will just be for a domestic audience, but that those debates in Parliament do raise the visibility of issues. So I think people will think about Montenegro maybe more broadly if we speak about it more often here in Parliament.
That's a great news, actually. I did see the debate and listen to the debate about the security in Kosovo, and it's a great news that you will do the same debate about Montenegro's security. So thank you for that. Let's, in a way, conclude this interview with your session about the situation in Montenegro, Kosovo, North Macedonia. Do you think that situation in these three countries are actually connected?
I think in some ways, I think that some of the issues in North Macedonia are a little different, and a lot of their issues around EU accession are slightly different. But I certainly think that all three countries do have some linked issues, and there are, on maybe not on security, there is some definite the same issues around, say, transport infrastructure. All three countries have those issues and are related because of the interaction between those countries and transport between those countries. But I do think that all three countries do have security issues. They all have issues which are of concern to NATO countries, and all three countries, again, want to be on the path to EU accession. So, and other neighbouring countries, or one neighbouring country in particular, Serbia, doesn't want to see that path to EU accession, to global prominence, continue because of their own national agenda.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, Mr. Sobel, thank you so much for taking your time for Gradska Television and for this interview, especially since we recorded this interview in two sequences. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Uvaženi gledaoci, poštovani slušaoci, pratili ste još jedno izdanje emisije Znam da znaš. Moje ime je Bojana Dabović, moj današnji sagovornik bio je gospodin Alex Sobel, poslanik Laborističke partije u britanskom parlamentu. Hvala vam na pažnji i ugodan dan želim.